This short video is about the last part of Lab 7, Table Operations, where we're creating new tables. Within this part of the lab, you're given the soils data layer, and you want to display the soils data layer on your screen by adding it from the Lab 7 directory. Let's take a look at the soils data layer. We'll open the attribute table and you'll notice some values within it that primarily area, perimeter, soil UTM ID, and soil type. And we're mostly interested in the soil type field. And if we take a look at the properties of that, so if we look at properties and we take a look at fields, we can get an idea of the structure of this. So there's a series of fields within the soil that are all double, and the length is either 12.3 or 11.0, and the precision indicates the decimal. So there would be 12 numbers, 3 of which would be decimal. All right? In this case, 11 numbers. In this case, 0 would be decimal. All right? And here, a real number could have a decimal or without a decimal. In the case of integer, which is our soil type, which is what we're going to use for our key, that only has 5, and obviously it has no decimal because it's just an integer. And that's what we're going to use as our key that we're going to join our external file. Now what you're going to need to do is to build an external file. And in order to build the external file, you'll want to use the Excel to build a file that looks something like this. And the instructions are in the lab instructions. And you'll be opening an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll be typing in soil type on the very first line, name, FERT class, and drain class. And you want to make sure there's underscores between instead of spaces, because when you're naming fields that go into a database, they can't have spaces in them. Then you're going to fill these values in, and these are listed in the instructions, so you could copy them. And we're going to take this file and save it as a CSV, a comma delimited file. Now, in order to save it as a comma delimited file, we go to File in Excel, File, and we do Save As, and we'll browse to our folder that we want to save it to, and ideally we would save this within the Lab 7 folder, and we'll navigate, and once in that folder we'll want to name it Soil Props. Okay, and we'll want to save this as a CSV, a comma delimited. Okay, now this is where it gets a little confusing, so we're going to save that. Okay, now at this point we've saved it as a comma delimited file. We don't need to keep this as an Excel format. Okay, if we want to, we could say yes and keep this as also as an Excel spreadsheet. But in this particular case, we've got it saved as a CSV, so we'll say no, we don't want to save it as an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll just exit out of that dialog box. We can then close Excel, and we don't need to save anything because we've saved it as our CSV. So it's a little confusing when you're leaving Excel. You can save it as that extra, but it's an extra copy. Now we want to add our CSV to our session, so we use this tool over here where we're adding a delimited text layer. So we'll click on that, and we get our little dialog box. We make sure it's a CSV, and we're going to browse for our CSV in our Lab 7, and you can see we find our soil props because we're looking for the text file, the CSV. A CSV is also referred to as a type of text file. It's just a comma delimited file. And now we're going to take the defaults. In this case, we'll just not bother putting anything else in. We're just grabbing our data, and but we do need to enter something to say this is just an attribute table. So here we would add our X and Y if it was coming in spatially. This is not a spatial layer. This is just a data layer. So we click in No Geometry, attribute table only. Now you see the OK button is available. and we say OK, and now it's added to our canvas. So now we can start with our soil layer, and we're going to go to the properties of our soil layer. And you remember we did this earlier. We go to joins, and we're going to do plus, and we're going to join that with the soil props, and we're going to be using soil type to join to soil type in our soil file, and we'll say OK, and now we've got an apply. So now we've got a soil file. We can open it and compare to what we saw before. You can see that we've got our original several fields here, and now we've got our data hooked onto the side. And you'll notice from entering about 18 records, we've now exploded that to 122. So we just added 18 records, one for each of the soil types, and it matched up the soil types. And if there were several 48s, and it duplicated the 48s, and you should get the idea. So it joined all the soil props data to the soil. Now we can use one of these fields in our map. So we're going to go to the soil file, properties, we go to style, and we're going to go to category, and we're going to select our field, which in our case is fertility class, and we're going to classify, and we've got 5 fertility classes. I'm going to remove that extra one. And I've got 5 different fertility classes, and I'm going to apply that and say OK. And now I've got my new soil map. And you can see that this soil map is displaying the various fertility classes from the most fertile to the least fertile. And you get a little idea along the river here. There's a river in this location down the center here, and it's some of the most fertile land is along that. You can see that it's 5, and whereas the least fertile would be on the high mountain, on the ridges, and you get where it's very rocky. So you're getting a little idea of where the fertility is best or worst in this particular basin. Now we make a map with that, and we'll continue. So here's our map, and we'll export that as a PDF. Export it as a PDF. And now the last thing we have to do is to add another composer. So we can close that composer and add one more composer. We can add a new one. We can call this table 4, or table. Actually, we call it table 1 because it's our first table. So we've got a table, and now what we want to do is to add our table to a PDF. And what we're going to do is to go to our layout, and we're going to add our table to the layout. And we've got our table, and we can stretch it out, and it doesn't provide a lot of detail, but it's at least useful, and then you can export that as a PDF. So you've got a table, and you've got your 3 maps for the lab. This completes this section. Thank you.